Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you gave them everything, only to watch them weaponize your love against you in a courtroom? Have you ever stood before a judge while the people who were supposed to protect you paid expensive lawyers to destroy you? I never thought I'd be that person. I never imagined that the family I built my entire life around would one day become my greatest enemies. But there I was, standing in that cold courtroom, my hands trembling as I clutched a folder filled with documents that felt like they were burning my fingers, while across from me sat 3 lawyers in pristine suits, their eyes cold and calculating, paid handsomely by my own in-laws to take everything from me. My mother-in-law wouldn't even look at me. My father-in-law stared with such hatred that I felt it like a physical weight on my chest. And my husband, the man I'd loved for 15 years, the father of my children, sat between them with his head down, refusing to meet my eyes. This is the story of how I lost everything, how I was pushed to the absolute edge of despair, and how one single question from a judge I'd never met before changed the entire trajectory of my life. This is the story of the day I realized that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most capable of destroying you, and how I found the strength to survive when survival seemed impossible. It started on what I thought was going to be an ordinary Tuesday morning. I remember every detail of that day with such clarity that it haunts me. The sun was streaming through the kitchen windows as I made breakfast for my 2 children, Emma, who was 7, and Jake, who was 5. They were arguing over who got the last chocolate chip pancake, their voices high and sweet in that way that only children's voices can be. I was pouring orange juice, smiling at their bickering, feeling that warm sense of contentment that comes from simple, domestic moments. My husband David had already left for work, or so I thought. The coffee maker was gurgling, the radio was playing some soft morning jazz, and everything felt so beautifully, perfectly normal. I had no idea that in less than 3 hours, my entire world would implode. I had no idea that the life I'd carefully built over 15 years of marriage was about to be systematically dismantled by the very people I'd welcomed into my heart as family. When the doorbell rang at 9:37 in the morning, I was still in my pajamas, wiping syrup off Jake's face. I opened the door with a smile, expecting maybe a package delivery or a neighbor stopping by. Instead, I found myself face to face with a man in a crisp navy suit holding a manila envelope. The moment I saw his expression, professional and detached, something inside me knew. Something primal and instinctive screamed danger. He asked if I was Sarah Mitchell. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. He handed me the envelope and said those words that would echo in my nightmares for months to come. You've been served. Legal proceedings regarding custody, divorce, and asset distribution. Court date is in 30 days. I stood there in my doorway, barefoot and stunned, holding this envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, while behind me, my children laughed and played, completely unaware that their entire world was about to be torn apart. I don't remember closing the door. I don't remember walking back to the kitchen. I only remember sitting at the table, my hands shaking so badly I could barely open the envelope, and pulling out page after page of legal documents that might as well have been written in a foreign language for all the sense they made to me in that moment. Petition for divorce, petition for full custody of minor children, petition for division of marital assets, petition for temporary restraining order. Those words swam before my eyes, and underneath each petition was a signature I recognized immediately. David Mitchell, my husband, the man who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, for better or worse, till death do us part. But it wasn't just David's name on those documents. As I flipped through the pages with trembling fingers, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The legal representation section listed not 1, not 2, but 3 attorneys from Morrison, Caldwell, and Associates, one of the most expensive and ruthless law firms in the state. And listed as co-petitioners, providing financial backing for the legal fees, were James and Patricia Hartley, David's parents, my in-laws, the people I'd called mom and dad for 15 years, the people who'd held my hand in the delivery room when Emma was born because my own mother had passed away years before, the people who'd told me I was the daughter they'd always wanted. They were paying lawyers, expensive ones, to destroy me, to take my children away from me, to paint me as an unfit mother, a dangerous person, someone who needed to be removed from my own children's lives. I read through their claims with growing horror. Emotional instability, neglectful parenting, potential substance abuse issues, financial irresponsibility. Each accusation was more outrageous than the last, each one a complete fabrication, and yet there they were in black and white, signed and notarized, ready to be presented to a judge who didn't know me, who would only see these allegations and make decisions about my children based on lies. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my entire life, and I don't use that word lightly. I've been through difficult things before. I lost my mother to cancer when I was 23. I've experienced grief and loss and heartbreak, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the systematic destruction of everything I held dear. David moved out that same day, and when he came to collect his things, he wouldn't speak to me except through text messages, even though we were in the same house. He packed his belongings with mechanical efficiency while I stood in the hallway, tears streaming down my face, begging him to tell me what had happened, what I'd done to deserve this. He never answered. He just loaded his car and drove away, and I watched through the window as he pulled out of our driveway, possibly for the last time as my husband, and I felt something inside me shatter so completely I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to put the pieces back together. The children were confused and scared. Emma kept asking why Daddy wasn't coming home, and I didn't know how to explain something I didn't understand myself. Jake started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 3. I tried to hold it together for them, tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but inside I was falling apart. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every moment of my marriage, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong, what I'd missed, what signs I should have seen. Had David been planning this for months? Had his parents been whispering in his ear, turning him against me gradually over time? Or had something happened suddenly, some catalyst that transformed me from beloved daughter-in-law to enemy number 1 overnight? I had no answers, only questions that multiplied like bacteria in my brain, consuming every thought, every moment of peace. I hired a lawyer. Or rather, I tried to hire a lawyer. I called every family law attorney in my area, and what I discovered made my situation even more desperate. Morrison, Caldwell and Associates, the firm representing David and his family, had apparently done what's called a conflicts check with every major law firm in the region. It's a legal tactic that essentially prevents those firms from representing the opposing party. I was told again and again that they couldn't take my case due to conflicts of interest. The Hartley family had money, serious money, and they were using it strategically to ensure I couldn't mount an adequate defense. I finally found a lawyer willing to take my case, a solo practitioner named Margaret Chen, who worked out of a small office above a dry cleaner. She was kind and seemed competent, but she was honest with me about my situation. "You're going up against one of the best firms in the state," she told me during our first meeting, her eyes sympathetic but realistic. "They have unlimited resources and 3 attorneys working full-time on this case. I'm one person with a caseload of 20 other clients. I'll do my best for you, Sarah, but you need to understand what you're facing." I understood. I was David fighting Goliath, except I didn't have a sling or any stones. I had the truth, but as I was learning very quickly, truth doesn't always matter in legal proceedings when the other side has better lawyers and deeper pockets. Margaret filed responses to their petitions, but every document we submitted was met with an avalanche of counter motions, objections, and supplemental filings from Morrison, Caldwell, and Associates. They buried us in paperwork, a common tactic designed to overwhelm and exhaust the opposition, and it was working. I spent every spare moment reading legal documents, trying to understand the strategies being used against me, trying to help Margaret formulate our defense. But every time we took one step forward, they pushed us 3 steps back. The custody evaluation was scheduled for the 3rd week, and I prepared for it like I was preparing for the most important exam of my life, because in many ways, I was. A court-appointed psychologist would be interviewing me, observing me with my children, reviewing my home and parenting practices, and then submitting a report to the judge that would heavily influence the custody decision. I cleaned my house until it was spotless. I organized all of Emma and Jake's toys, their books, their artwork. I prepared meals from scratch to demonstrate my commitment to their nutrition and well-being. I wanted everything to be perfect, to show that I was a good mother, that my children were thriving in my care. The psychologist, Dr. Raymond Torres, arrived on a Thursday afternoon. He was a middle-aged man with a kind face and a clipboard that he wrote on constantly throughout his visit. He watched me interact with the children, asked them questions about their daily routines, their feelings, their relationship with both parents. Emma and Jake were nervous at first, but they warmed up to him quickly. They showed him their rooms, their favorite toys, told him about school and friends and the bedtime stories I read to them every night. I felt cautiously optimistic. Surely anyone could see that these were happy, healthy children who were loved and well cared for. Surely the truth would be evident. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known at the time, was that Morrison, Caldwell, and associates had already met with Dr. Torres before he came to my house. They'd presented him with their version of events, their carefully constructed narrative of an unstable mother and a concerned father. They'd primed him to look for problems, to interpret normal childhood behaviors through a lens of concern. And when his report came back 2 weeks later, it was devastating. The report acknowledged that the children appeared healthy and that the home environment was adequate, but it raised questions about my emotional state, my ability to co-parent effectively, and whether the stress of the divorce proceedings was affecting my parenting capacity. It recommended that primary custody be awarded to the father, with me receiving supervised visitation until I could demonstrate improved stability. Supervised visitation. The words felt like a knife to my heart. I would only be allowed to see my own children with a third party present, as if I were some kind of danger to them. Margaret tried to reassure me that reports could be challenged, that we could bring in our own expert witnesses, but I could see the concern in her eyes. This was a significant blow to our case, and we both knew it. The worst part was telling Emma and Jake that they would be staying with Daddy for a while, and that when they came to visit me, there would be someone else there too. Emma cried and asked why. What had she done wrong? And I had to explain through my own tears that she hadn't done anything wrong, that sometimes grown-ups had complicated problems that had nothing to do with how much Mommy and Daddy loved them. But even as I said the words, I wondered if Emma could sense that I was barely holding myself together, that I was lying awake every night consumed by anxiety and grief, that I was losing weight because food tasted like ash in my mouth, that some days I wasn't sure how I was going to survive the next hour, let alone the next week or month or year. Have you ever felt so betrayed by life that you questioned everything you thought you knew about the world? Have you ever loved people so completely that their rejection felt like a kind of death? Comment below if you've ever experienced a betrayal that shook your very foundation, because I want you to know you're not alone. As the court date approached, David's parents, James and Patricia, began a campaign that I can only describe as psychological warfare. They had been such a huge part of my life for 15 years. Patricia had taught me her secret recipe for apple pie. James had walked me down the aisle at my wedding because my own father wasn't in my life. They had been at the hospital when both my children were born. They had celebrated every holiday with us, every birthday, every milestone. And now they were using every intimate detail they knew about me, every vulnerable moment I'd shared with them, every confidence I'd trusted them with, as ammunition in their legal battle. They submitted affidavits to the court describing incidents they claimed to have witnessed, painting me as an unstable, neglectful mother. Patricia wrote about a time when Emma fell off her bike and scraped her knee, claiming I'd been inattentive and on my phone when it happened. The truth was I'd been standing right there. I'd run to Emma immediately, cleaned and bandaged her knee, and comforted her. But in Patricia's telling, it became evidence of my negligence. James submitted a statement about a time he'd visited our home and found dirty dishes in the sink and toys scattered in the living room, presenting it as evidence of an unsafe, chaotic environment. The reality was he'd stopped by unannounced on a Saturday morning when we were in the middle of a fun, lazy pajama day as a family. But context didn't matter. The affidavits kept coming, each one a distortion of reality, each one designed to support the narrative that I was unfit to be a mother to my own children. I tried to fight back with my own evidence. I gathered photographs of happy family moments, report cards showing the children's excellent progress in school, letters from their teachers describing them as well-adjusted and thriving. I submitted my own affidavits from friends and neighbors who could attest to my parenting abilities. But everything I presented was met with objections and counter-arguments from the team of lawyers. They had an answer for everything, a way to spin every piece of evidence in their favor. One of their tactics was to claim that any signs of the children's well-being were due to David's positive influence, and that my contributions were minimal or even detrimental. They brought in an expensive child development expert who testified that children often hide distress to protect an unstable parent, suggesting that Emma and Jake's apparent happiness in my care was actually a sign of their anxiety about my emotional state. It was maddening. Every truth I spoke was twisted. Every fact I presented was reinterpreted. I felt like I was living in an alternate reality where up was down and black was white, where the love and dedication I'd poured into my children for their entire lives could be repackaged as something sinister and harmful. Margaret did her best, but she was outgunned and we both knew it. The night before the final hearing, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my empty house, walking through rooms that still held echoes of the family we used to be, and I wondered if I would ever see my children sleep under this roof again. I thought about giving up, about just signing whatever papers they wanted me to sign, letting David have full custody, letting his parents win, because the fight was costing me everything and I was so tired, so completely exhausted from the constant battle. But then I thought about Emma's laugh, the way she would run to me after school with her arms spread wide for a hug. I thought about Jake's little hand in mine when we crossed the street, his absolute trust that I would keep him safe. I thought about bedtime stories and skinned knees and birthday parties and all the tiny, beautiful moments that make up a mother's relationship with her children. And I knew I couldn't give up. Even if the odds were impossible, even if I was probably going to lose, I had to fight. I had to stand in that courtroom and tell the truth, even if no one believed me. I owed that to my children. I owed that to myself. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with shaking hands, putting on the conservative navy suit Margaret had advised me to wear. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I'd lost 15 pounds. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. My skin looked gray and my eyes looked haunted. This is what grief looks like, I thought. This is what betrayal does to a person. I drove to the courthouse in silence, my mind strangely blank after months of racing thoughts. I parked and sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to gather my courage. When I finally walked into the courthouse, I saw David and his parents already there with their legal team. The three lawyers looked confident and well-rested, expensive briefcases in hand, their shoes polished to a mirror shine. Patricia was wearing pearls and a designer dress. James looked distinguished in a three-piece suit. And David, my David, was wearing the tie I'd bought him for our 10th anniversary, which felt like such a small, cruel detail that it almost broke me right there in the courthouse lobby. They all looked at me as I approached, and I saw something in Patricia's eyes that looked almost like pity, but it was quickly replaced by that cold determination I'd come to know so well over the past weeks. We filed into the courtroom, and I felt like I was walking to my own execution. The judge, Honorable Catherine Brennan, was already seated at the bench. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The bailiff called the court to order, and suddenly it was all real, all happening, the moment I'd been dreading for weeks. Morrison, Caldwell, and Associates presented their case first, and they were masterful. The lead attorney, a man named Richard Morrison, was smooth and persuasive as he laid out their narrative. He spoke about David as a devoted father who'd grown increasingly concerned about his children's well-being. He presented the affidavits from James and Patricia as concerned grandparents who'd witnessed troubling behavior. He referenced the custody evaluation report and Dr. Torres's recommendations. He painted me as a woman on the edge of a breakdown, someone whose emotional instability posed a risk to two vulnerable children who deserved a stable, secure home environment. He even managed to make my love for my children sound pathological, describing my emotional reactions to the divorce proceedings as evidence of poor coping skills rather than the natural response of a mother fighting for her children. As I listened to him speak, I felt increasingly hopeless. He was so polished, so convincing. If I hadn't been living this situation, if I'd been an outside observer hearing his presentation, I might have believed him too. When it was Margaret's turn to present our case, she did her best. She spoke passionately about my dedication as a mother, about the children's clear bond with me, about the lack of any actual evidence of neglect or harm. She pointed out the inconsistencies in the affidavits from James and Patricia, the way normal parenting moments had been twisted into something sinister. She questioned the conclusions of the custody evaluation, noting that Dr. Torres had spent only 3 hours observing me with my children while giving significant weight to unsubstantiated allegations. But I could see it wasn't enough. The judge listened attentively, but there was nothing in her expression that gave me hope. When Margaret finished her presentation, I felt like the walls were closing in on me. This was it. This was how I lost my children. But then something happened that I never could have anticipated. Judge Brennan looked up from the documents spread before her on the bench, and she removed her reading glasses with a slow, deliberate motion. The courtroom fell silent, that heavy silence that feels like it has weight and substance. She looked first at the 3 lawyers representing David and his family, then at David himself, then at James and Patricia sitting in the front row with identical expressions of righteous certainty on their faces. And then she turned her gaze to me, and for the first time in months, I didn't see judgment or suspicion in someone's eyes. I saw something else, something that looked like understanding, or maybe recognition. Judge Brennan leaned forward slightly, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable authority that made everyone in that courtroom sit up straighter. "I have reviewed all the documents submitted in this case," she said. "I have read the petitions, the affidavits, the expert reports, and the custody evaluation. I have listened to both sides present their arguments. And I have one question that I need answered before I make any rulings." She paused, and the silence stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. The question she asked next would change everything. It was simple, direct, and it cut through all the legal maneuvering and expensive rhetoric like a knife through butter. Judge Brennan looked directly at David, and she asked, "Mr. Mitchell, in your own words, without consulting your attorneys, can you tell me one specific incident where your wife's behavior directly harmed or endangered your children? Not speculation, not concerns, not what your parents told you they observed. I want you to tell me about one actual event that you personally witnessed where Sarah Mitchell's actions as a mother put Emma or Jake at risk." The courtroom went completely still. I stopped breathing. Margaret's hand found mine under the table and squeezed gently. David's lawyers immediately began to stand, to object, to interrupt, but Judge Brennan held up one hand. "Please sit down," she said firmly. "This is a simple question, and Mr. Mitchell is capable of answering it himself." David looked at his lawyers, then at his parents, then down at his hands. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. His mouth opened, then closed. He shifted in his seat. His father leaned forward as if to whisper something to him, but Judge Brennan's sharp look stopped him immediately. "Mr. Mitchell," she repeated, "I'm waiting." And in that moment, watching David struggle to answer what should have been a simple question if any of their allegations were true, something inside me began to hope again. He couldn't do it. After all the petitions and affidavits and expert testimonies, after all the money his parents had spent on lawyers and legal strategies, after all the character assassination and carefully constructed narratives, David couldn't name a single specific incident where I had actually harmed or endangered our children, because there wasn't one. There had never been one. And suddenly, the entire house of cards they'd built began to collapse. I watched emotions play across David's face: confusion, shame, realization, maybe even regret, and I saw him truly look at me for the first time in weeks. Really look at me. And I think in that moment he saw what he'd done, what he'd allowed his parents to do, the destruction they'd wreaked on our family in the name of whatever twisted logic they'd used to justify this nightmare. "I don't," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have a specific incident like that." The words hung in the air like a confession, and I saw Patricia's face go pale, saw James grip the armrest of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. The three lawyers immediately went into damage control mode, trying to explain that the lack of a single dramatic incident didn't negate the pattern of concerning behaviors they'd documented. But Judge Brennan wasn't having it. She held up her hand again for silence, and when she spoke, there was an edge to her voice that made it clear she was not pleased with what she'd just witnessed. "I have been a family court judge for 23 years, she said, "and I have seen many cases involving custody disputes. I have seen genuine situations where children needed to be removed from harmful environments. I have seen parents who were truly unfit, who posed real dangers to their children's well-being. This is not one of those cases." She looked down at the documents again, shuffling through them with an expression that could only be described as disgusted. "What I see here is a pattern of allegations based largely on hearsay, interpretation, and what appears to be a coordinated effort to paint a devoted mother as incompetent. The custody evaluation raises concerns about Ms. Mitchell's emotional state during divorce proceedings, which is to be expected when someone is fighting for their children. The affidavits from the paternal grandparents describe normal household situations reframed as evidence of neglect. And most tellingly, the father himself cannot articulate a single concrete reason why his children would be better off with limited contact with their mother." She turned to Richard Morrison and his colleagues. "Counselors, I am deeply troubled by this case. You have used significant resources to overwhelm the opposing party. You have submitted what I consider to be highly questionable affidavits, and you have advocated for a custody arrangement that appears to be driven more by family politics than by the best interests of these children. I want to be very clear about something. This court's primary concern is the well-being of Emma and Jake Mitchell, not the feelings or wishes of the grandparents, not the financial interests of this law firm, the children. And nothing I have seen in any of these documents suggests that these children are anything other than healthy, happy, and thriving under the care of both their parents." Judge Brennan then turned her attention to James and Patricia, and her expression softened slightly but remained firm. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, I understand that you love your grandchildren and believe you are acting in their best interests. But I must tell you that what you have done here, funding a legal campaign to separate your grandchildren from their mother based on flimsy evidence and reinterpreted normal parenting moments, is not in those children's best interests. Children need their mothers. Except in cases of genuine abuse or neglect, which this clearly is not, courts presume that children benefit from strong relationships with both parents. Your actions have caused tremendous harm to this family, and I suspect you will come to regret the role you've played in this situation. Patricia's face crumpled, and I saw tears begin to stream down her cheeks, but I felt no satisfaction in her distress. I just felt tired and sad and emotionally wrung out. Judge Brennan took a breath and then delivered her ruling. After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, I am denying the petition for primary custody to the father. I am denying the request for supervised visitation. Instead, I am ordering a joint custody arrangement with equal parenting time. Both parents clearly love their children. Both parents appear capable of providing appropriate care. The children will benefit from maintaining strong relationships with both parents. The divorce will proceed, and assets will be divided according to state law. But the custody arrangement will be 50-50, unless future evidence emerges to warrant a change. She paused and looked directly at me. Ms. Mitchell, I can see that this process has been extremely difficult for you. I want you to know that this court recognizes your dedication to your children and finds no credible evidence of the allegations that have been made against you. You are a good mother, and your children are fortunate to have you. Those words, coming from this stranger in a black robe, broke something open inside me that I'd been holding tightly closed for weeks. Tears began streaming down my face, and I didn't even try to stop them. The hearing concluded shortly after that, with discussions of filing deadlines for the divorce proceedings and scheduling for the custody arrangement. David's lawyers looked shell-shocked. Morrison was already conferring with his colleagues in urgent whispers, probably discussing whether there were grounds for an appeal, but I knew they wouldn't find any. Judge Brennan had been thorough, and her reasoning was sound. The case they'd built had been exposed as the manufactured crisis it always was, and there was no coming back from that. As we filed out of the courtroom, David approached me hesitantly. His parents tried to follow, but he held up a hand to stop them. For the first time in months, it was just the two of us, standing in the courthouse hallway with lawyers and strangers bustling past us. "Sarah," he said, and his voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand what they were doing, what I was letting them do. I was angry about other things, about us, about the marriage, and they convinced me that you were the problem, that you were going to take the kids away from me, that I needed to strike first." I just stared at him. This man I'd loved for so long, and I realized I didn't know him anymore. Maybe I never had. The David I thought I'd married would never have done this, would never have allowed his parents to wage war against the mother of his children. But this David, standing in front of me with tears in his eyes and regret on his face, he'd been there all along, and I just hadn't seen him clearly. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly. "Not today. Maybe not ever. You let them try to take my children. You signed papers calling me unfit. You sat in that courtroom and let them paint me as some kind of monster. Even if you regret it now, you still did it." He nodded, looking down at the floor. "I know," he said. "I know I did, and I'll have to live with that. I just want you to know that I do love Emma and Jake, and I know you're a good mother. I should have said that in there. I should have said it weeks ago." We worked out the custody schedule over the following weeks, and true to the judge's order, it was split equally. The divorce proceeded, and while it wasn't pleasant, there was no more legal warfare. James and Patricia tried to reach out to me several times, leaving voicemails and sending letters expressing their regret, trying to explain that they'd only been trying to protect their grandchildren, that they'd gotten caught up in fear and misunderstanding. I didn't respond. Some betrayals are too deep for simple apologies to heal. Maybe someday I'll be ready to hear them out, to try to understand what led them down the path of hiring lawyers to destroy me. But that day hasn't come yet, and I'm not sure it ever will. What I do know is that I survived something that almost destroyed me. I stood in front of people who wanted me erased from my children's lives, and I endured. I fought even when the fight seemed hopeless. And in the end, the truth mattered. One simple question from a judge who took the time to look past the expensive lawyers and polished presentations to see the real situation, that question saved me. It saved my relationship with my children. It exposed the manufactured nature of the entire case against me. Judge Brennan's question reminded everyone in that courtroom that facts matter, that evidence matters, that you can't just say terrible things about someone and have them be true because you paid lawyers to say them persuasively. When I tucked Emma and Jake into bed that first night after the ruling, when I was finally able to do that again without a supervisor watching my every move, Emma looked up at me and asked if everything was okay now. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead and told her the truth. "It's going to be different, sweetheart," I said. "Mommy and Daddy won't be married anymore, and you'll have two houses instead of one. But you will always, always have us both. We both love you so much, and we're going to work together to make sure you and Jake are happy and safe." "Is that because of what happened in the big building with the serious lady?" she asked, and I realized she meant the judge. I nodded. "Yes, baby. The serious lady made sure that you get to be with both your mommy and your daddy." "She made a good choice," Emma said with the simple confidence of childhood. Then she turned over and went to sleep, and I sat there in the darkness of her room, listening to her breathe, feeling gratitude so intense it was almost painful. Looking back now, I can see this experience changed me fundamentally. There's a before version of me that was perhaps too trusting, too willing to believe that people who said they loved you would always have your best interests at heart. And there's an after version, the woman I am now, who understands that love and loyalty are complex things, that family can hurt you more deeply than strangers ever could, because they know exactly where your vulnerabilities are. I learned that the legal system, for all its flaws, can sometimes work the way it's supposed to when you get the right judge at the right time. I learned that truth doesn't always win, but it's still worth fighting for. I learned that I am stronger than I ever thought possible, that I could endure betrayal and loss and fear, and still get up every morning and be a mother to my children. I learned that sometimes the people who hire lawyers to destroy you are acting out of their own fear and brokenness, and while that doesn't excuse their actions, it can help you understand them. Most importantly, I learned that my children's love for me wasn't something that could be taken away by legal documents or custody evaluations or expensive lawyers. Emma and Jake knew who I was. They knew I loved them. And that bond, that fundamental connection between mother and child, proved to be stronger than everything arrayed against it. Have you ever been through a custody battle or a divorce that felt like it was destroying you? Have you ever had to stand up to people who were supposed to love you when they turned against you? I want to hear your stories, your experiences, your moments of survival. Please share them in the comments below because I truly believe that sharing our stories helps us heal and helps others feel less alone. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the fear and pain and ultimate triumph along with me, please hit that like button. Your engagement helps this channel reach more people who might need to hear stories like this, who might be going through their own battles and need to know that survival is possible. And if you're not already subscribed to my Truth Revealed Tales, please click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. This channel is dedicated to sharing real stories from real people, stories of struggle and survival, betrayal and redemption, darkness and hope. Every video is a reminder that you're not alone, that whatever you're going through, someone else has faced something similar and made it through to the other side. The legal battle with my in-laws taught me that sometimes the worst fights come from the people closest to us, but it also taught me that truth and justice can still prevail. It taught me that one person asking one honest question at the right time can change everything. And it taught me that being a mother isn't about being perfect or never struggling or always having all the answers. It's about showing up, fighting for your children, loving them through the hard times, and trusting that love is enough even when it feels like the whole world is telling you it isn't. Thank you for watching, for listening, for being part of this community where we share our truths and support each other through the difficult stories life writes for us. Drop a comment, hit that like, subscribe to my Truth Revealed Tales, and remember that no matter what battle you're facing today, you are stronger than you know and you are not alone in the fight.